girl Tracy to come out and mash with he. Join Slingshot and Ingrid on the road for matrimony. We having fun till the sun go down. We not stopping till morning come. Matrimony is for everybody, yeah. Come and join me in Georgetown for some keen fun in the sun. No stress, no strain, I beg you please. Bring all your friends and your family. Don't leave out anybody when they welcome in. Atlantic breeze to cool you down. Hey, hey. Bright and early, all my friends waiting eagerly. Some selected, others adjusted. The fancy costume and thing. What? Knock, bacon, saltfish for breakfast. Horlick and Milo does give the rush. Matrimony is for everybody. Oh yes, they're selling food that is quite tasty. You're getting treated like royalty. Oh lad! Cook up rice, daiquiri with hot and spicy multani. Ay, ay, ay. Fried chicken, chow mein and conky. Wash it down with rice, rank and mobby. Cause matrimony is for everybody. Oh yeah.
Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you so very much for joining us this week. Well, we began our program with the voice of Slingshot. I thought it fit to do that because we are preparing for Matrimony. Matrimony is on the 23rd of February, which is next Friday, and let me use this opportunity right now in the onset of the program to remind you that we wouldn't be here on Facing the Nation Matrimony Day next week, because we know most of you would not be at home watching Facing the Nation. You're going to be into the fun and the float parade and every other good thing that comes with it. So we're going to give you a break, and of course we need to take a break too. You know, we need to go and join a few mash floats and see what's happening and so on. So I'm not going to deny myself the fun of doing that. Thanks again for joining us. Last week I promised to have the Father Carl Philadelphia, actually, who was the youngest priest ordained in Guyana, Catholic priest ordained in Guyana since the 1980s. He is still going to come on Facing the Nation, but there still needs to be the ironing out of some issues. So after the matrimony break, we'll try to have him at least before the Lenten season ends. And let me just remind you, for those who observe Lent, remember we're in the Lenten season, and it's very important to be moderate as you possibly can at this time, and remember those sacrifices of Christ. So we are going to try to have Father Carl Philadelphia right here on Facing the Nation before the Lenten season ends. As you know, you can remember last year we had Bishop Francis Allen himself on this very program. So we're just hoping to repeat that, and just to keep citizens in the know and keep you aware of exactly what's happening around you, and the various periods and so on in society that we either celebrate or we observe. Also last week we spoke with Professor Ivelaw Griffith. One of the main parts of that conversation, it had to do with the sudden hike in administrative fees at the University of Guyana. Now, I am happy that the president of the University of Guyana Student Society, Mr. Norwell Hinds, who has been here before today, I am happy that, he did reach out. And it's good. It's always good to get both sides of the story. Of course, you heard from Professor Griffith why you heard his reasons, the justifications for the hike in those fees. I'm happy to have here on Facing the Nation today Mr. Norwell Hinds. Again, he is the president of the University of Guyana Student Society. And he'll tell, and viewers, keep in mind, this is not a tit for tat or a fight fighting or pulling, tugging and back and forth. He also has the interest of the students at heart, so it's really good to hear his side and his take on that hike in those administrative fees. Norwell Hinds, welcome back to Facing the Nation.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. It's always a joy being on this program.
All right, great. And viewers, even though sometimes when he's on the program, we take him out of classes for him to do that, but you can't tell anyone that. Norwell, again, thank you so much for coming. Now, the hike in administrative fees. Last week, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, Professor Ivelaw Griffith, sought to justify it. You know, he had a lot to say in terms of why the increase was necessary at this time. First of all, what is your take, your group's take, your administration's take on the hike in those fees?
Yeah, thanks, Malika. First of all, you yourself a student, so
yes.
Really we're representing students of the university. The statutes of the university provide for the UGSS to provide for the concrete representation of students. So that's what our main mandate is, representation. Okay. I want to start off first by saying, as you rightly said, that is not, we don't see our engagement, although we disagree, as adversarial with the administration, and neither is it personal with the Vice Chancellor. And I see a lot of the comments on Facebook from students, and I want to address that here. Make it personal and make it a fight, but it's not a fight. It's not a fight. Okay, and I want to ensure that that's understood. The University of Guyana Student Society, our main challenge is that the fees were implemented at a time when we felt it was a difficult moment for students to face the burden. Right? It is true that perhaps from the point of view of the university, and with budget deficits and so on, the university probably has reasonable justifications for wanting more money. And it is also true that the University of Guyana Student Society was involved in the decision, at least at the level of the council. The president of the UGSS in that year, last year, sat there at the council meeting. He was involved in that, and he probably voted for the increases. But that was part of the budget presentation. You know, you come to the council and you say to the council, as the governance authority of the university, these are the expenses we expect for the year, and these are the sources of income. So and they have the documents here. So this the fee increases were presented as part of the estimates of income for the university. Now, as you know, budget has a life. Yeah. A budget life for 2017 ended December 31st, 2017. So students came to us on the 7th, around the 7th of January, and said, look, we had to pay for supplementals and we had to pay $5,000. Now, we didn't understand why they were paying $5,000 for supplemental. So the first thing was to reach out to the registrar and to confirm that indeed there's some new fees. But
the students coming to you, this actually happened before it was made public that there was.
Our first, as a council, our first information about these increases started around the 8th of January, when we received, and that morning I received some calls. Students said they had to pay $5,000 for supplemental, they don't know why, and so on. So we said, let's find out. So we asked the registrar, one, to confirm that these things, that students are being asked to pay these fees, and two, to demonstrate to us based on what decisions of the university, and three, to show when there was consultation or communication with the student population in respect of these fees. So those three things. So there was some time, the registrar responded, they said, look, you're right. Let's one, present all the new fees to you. At that time, we only knew about 2. But now we recognize there were over 21 fees that had been adjusted. 9 of those were new fees, entirely new fees. And that the university estimated that it was going to make 100% of its 2017, of its previous year's income on the fees itself, on these new fees. So
you're trying to play catch up. You're trying to fulfill the past year
in the new year, right? So we said, look, hold a minute. First, students don't know anything about this because you're the business entity. It's your job to communicate. You have to market and sell and justify so that people feel that, yeah, we're paying these fees, we're going to get some better services, right? So students didn't get that. So they agreed, okay, we're going to move the implementation date to March 1st. But after we examined the documents further, we said, look, some of these fees, we want the opportunity to renegotiate them. Because there's some fees that that we find difficult for students to bear. For example, the registrar used one example of students requesting student letters. A student letter is a routine letter from the university to say that you're a student. And that costs $5,000 where there was no cost. And that affects about 1,100 students. That's about 15% of the student population. That's a significant group. Now, the argument was that most of these students are students going to the US and want a visa, and it's part of the visa application. That might be true, but that's not all the cases. There are students who are working, sometimes in the public sector, and they need a letter to say that they're at the university, and if they need one for every semester, that's $10,000. You understand, for that student. So we're saying there are cases like that we really need to renegotiate.
I understand the need for, and again, yes, as a student, I do understand the need for renegotiation. What about the argument, which I know Professor made this, and I saw some people talking about this on social media. What about the argument that these fees that are now increased would have been that way years and years before? Of course, everything has changed now. Obviously, cost of living, everything. Because even you, as an individual in your household, the cost of living is higher for you, and obviously, the cost of living the cost of survival in this case will be higher for an institution or a highest learning institution. How do you respond to that? Okay, these fees had to increase now because we've been using the same amount of monies for years and years previously.
Yeah. I would say that that's a fair argument, but let's put the argument in context. If you go to a business place, and the business place tells you, we're going to make your services better. Pay me now for the cost of the better services, and then when the services are better, you'll pay some more because they're better. So it's sort of thing, and the other issue is that it comes at a time when there are lots of other fees that we need to put into context. That same council of 2017 agreed to several tuition fee increases that started to take effect academic year 2017.
Yes.
If you recall, back in 2016, 2015, when the university attempted to implement a 10% increase that had been agreed previously by a council, but that there was political pressure not to, from a previous administration, not to implement those fees because they felt it would be a bad political thing. Then the university attempted to implement those fees. Students objected, and the next year we got from 10% to 35%. And that needs to be communicated to students. So you start with 15% in this academic year, 10% in the next academic year, which starts in September, and 10% the following year. But listen to the trick in this. The statement was about 35%, but if you put 15%, then 10% on the next year, then 10% on the next year, that's in effect 40%, because you're compounding the increments, you see? So if you have $100, 15% of 100 is 115, right? When you add the 15%. But in the next year, when you add 10%,
the thing, when you take the years into consideration.
When you add the next 10% on that, that's not 25% anymore. You've just added 11.5 to that $115. So the increase now is 40% for students over that period. So now it's kind of like students were duped. You had a young UGSS that we're not the most organized, admittedly, but students were kind of duped. It's not 35, now it's 40% when you really look at it. Then the other issue is that in the agreement of the council last year, the 15% to begin with in the 2017-2018 academic year applies to continuing students, but new students start at 18%. So therefore, what you're looking at is not even 35, it's 38. And then when you look at it from a compounded perspective, you're looking at 43%. So we're getting to a point where by 2019, we're paying 40% on tuition fees of the last academic year.
I want to talk about where the talks are now and some other matters. As a student body, though, have you been getting some of the flack from the students on campus saying, okay, well, what y'all doing? Y'all sat there and allowed, which is, I know talks were ongoing and so on, but do you feel that you've been getting some amount of pressure from the students of themselves on campus?
Definitely a lot of pressure, because people feel the burden differently, and it's a big issue. There's some students who are on scholarship, and for some of them, they have a scholarship commitment. Any additional cost that they have to bear out of their pocket, some of them can't afford it. There was one young man, his name is Taylor, he's been posting a lot of Facebook. He claims, at least when he came to us at our town hall, he said, look, he is one of 3 young people from his village who has been able to come to university. On average, every 4 to 6 years, a student comes from his village to university. And the cost of coming for him is prohibitive, even though it's true.
Are you at liberty to say, because I know this is a whole different story by itself, but are you at liberty to say what village this is?
I can't recall the name of the village that he called.
Okay.
But he's from an Amerindian village.
Oh.
He's clearly from an Amerindian village. He said he said it was an Amerindian village. He himself is an indigenous person.
Okay.
All right. So the context, even though we admit that the costs are relatively low in the Caribbean, but we need to also put in perspective that average salaries, even though the current government has increased minimum wage and increased other benefits to citizens, particularly those in the public service, on average you're taking home about $80,000 as a public servant. If you're at least at a degree diploma level, some people less than that, right?
Exactly.
So if you're taking home $80,000, one semester, which is about 3 months, right? You need $240,000 to pay for your tuition, right? So it takes you 3 months to pay for 1 year, 3 months of your full salary. And this is not to put other expenses.
You can't take your full salary and do that, because you have to survive. You have to get sustenance. You have to be able to study.
So the fee is not. So our issue is, and what we've been saying as a student body, and we've been taking a lot of pressure on it. One, as a student society, the student society is one of the oldest organizations in this country, right? Youth organizations, non-partisan youth organizations. We were founded in 1973, right? But we're also one of the weakest youth organizations for many reasons over the years. Over the years, there hasn't been a lot of investment in the UGSS. So one of the things that this executive wants to do is that, look, we want to ensure that the UGSS is seen as an organization that is a good partner, a reliable partner. So we stand by decisions of past UGSSs, right? In the sense that we say, yes, the UGSS was present there. Okay. But as the current UGSS, we also say, look, notwithstanding the fact that we were there, we have some new considerations to bring to the table. Let's talk about those. Life has changed for our students. Let's talk about that. So our position has been, from a strategic standpoint, this is an opportunity for us to have a larger conversation about consultation, about communication, about maybe a fees policy for the university, different categories of fees. So we wanted to have that conversation. So we wrote to the administration on January 16th saying that, look, 2 basic points. One, we feel there wasn't enough consultation on this entire administrative fee issue. It's too soon. We think at least you should introduce it at the beginning of an academic year. So let's give some students some time. And then we said, point 2, listen, when we look at this thing holistically and we look at the statutes of the university, that the council has to approve this in the new budget year. So from a strategic standpoint, it gives us an opportunity, this current executive of the UGSS, to go to the council with our petition, with our case, with the new circumstances of students, and maybe we can look at some of those fees that we could perhaps try to renegotiate. So we ended our conversation when we met with the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar on January 25th, but basically the administration is saying that, look, we're going to go ahead with these fees because we need the money, and we saying, we hear you, you need the money, but we disagree. And if you go ahead with the fees, we're going to seek a legal opinion as to resolving
So-
the difference of view in the process.
So that is that is where that is now. It's almost up in the air. They're going ahead, and you're saying legal action. So
But our legal action is true. What we're asking is for the court to say, listen, at least the new council of the University of Guyana, when the budget is presented, should have the opportunity to hear the case of the student society with respect to the fees.
So in essence, it's not to stop the increase.
Well, we don't think we have that.
You don't have that.
That we're saying that the university, this is all about good governance, and the university being able to demonstrate good governance, especially as we come into local government election in September. We have general elections in 2020. So especially as the university is positioned where it is as sort of like the leaders of the brain
Because
of the country, we want to demonstrate that.
Yeah, you eventually you have to set the tone and set the example. And I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you the same thing I asked Professor Griffith. I don't know that he gave a flat black and white answer. And I don't know that you can either. But isn't there anything else that can be done before it gets to that courts, legal?
I think so. As I said, our approach to, because there's a disagreement, right? So where do you resolve disagreements? In the court.
Yeah,
So
third
we're
party
saying that, look, we believe that because it was part of a budget estimate, that these fees should, that it can't be implemented in the new budget period unless there's a new budget. That's our position. That's basically our argument. The administration is saying, no, that's not so. It was agreed to last year. The UGSS was present. We're going to go ahead with it.
Okay.
We're saying, all right, let's resolve that. Let's get a third party to resolve that, because resolving that is important for good governance for the university. And once we've resolved that, we hope from the UGSS perspective that that resolution helps us to re-engage the university in the broader conversation about consultation with students, communication, because you're a business entity and you have to be involved in marketing. I mean, you know this stuff, right? You have to market, you have to be able to sell your product. You have to be able to say to students that, look, you're going to pay new fees, but it's going to do this. What are the guarantees? When you now pay extra for a transcript, are you going to get it in 2 weeks? And if you don't get it in 2 weeks, or you don't get it in 3 days, then what is the penalty? What do you get? What is the recourse, right? Last year, we engaged the university with respect to students who were graduating. And there was, that whole fiasco with the Sapphire part of the graduation. We agree in the principle of having they had the separate graduations to accommodate more people. But something went wrong.
Clearly.
Right? Clearly something went wrong. So we wrote to the administration, we said, listen, our view is, these are the list of issues that students have said went wrong. In the interest of the image of the university, in the interest of being good marketing and customer relations, apologize, say, okay, everything didn't go smoothly, and offer a rebate. We proposed a rebate, not a refund, because we don't want the university to be out of money. So we said a rebate because you might want a transcript as part of that graduating class, and you can come and get that as maybe a reduced price. Some students never even come for the transcripts. Some come 20 years after. So it didn't represent an immediate cost to the university.
Okay.
The administration said no. So we want to open the conversation about consultation, communication, a fees policy. Remember, we have moved from the university as a legacy, as part of our national movement or nationalist movement. If there was one thing that we can say that LFS Burnham and Dr. Chedi Jagan agreed on, two things we can say. One, Guyana has to be an independent sovereign state. Right?
Yeah.
They agreed about that.
Yes, even though they had very different methods, but yes,
But they agreed about that.
They did.
And secondly, they agreed that Guyana must have its own university, founded by Dr. Jagan, but the campus built by LFS Burnham. And if you look at it, the campus sits on 100 acres of land. Mr. Burnham wasn't thinking about a small pion university. He was thinking about a massive complex for students. And I'm saying that in terms of social cohesion, good governance, this university is our best example of our ambition as a nation, you know. And the UGSS is not interested in you know, bringing down the University of Guyana. That's not our interest.
It's about collaborative efforts.
And we want to have that conversation. We want to be able to talk about a fees policy. I've been doing some research personally. Other members of the executive have been doing research. We've been looking at examples from Britain, because Britain has a similar experience with their universities. They used to be you know, free education, publicly funded
and
universities.
It's been successful.
And now they've moved to some universities. There's a fee that you pay, but it's regulated.
Okay.
The ministers would regulate the cost, and then they have categories of fees. So there's some sectors, for example, maybe education, health, and so on, that there's a cap. This university can't charge more than a certain amount for students coming to study in that field. And then there might be categories based on vulnerable groups that you might be. If you declare yourself to be a person of Afro descent, you get a particular rate. If you declare yourself to be a person of indigenous origin, you get a particular rate. Those kinds of things. But also what it talks about, the examples that we've looked at, is the student as a customer. So the student as a customer, you don't implement fees in the middle of an academic year. The university hasn't even started to communicate to students that in September you're going to be paying an additional 10% increase on your tuition fee. Where are you selling that as a marketing campaign? You know, when you look at the ads for the university in the newspaper, it's the same as we've seen 20 years ago.
Haven't you had a chance to plug freshness, some amount of freshness? Again, I know the UGSS is a body by itself. Haven't you had a chance to plug freshness? And I would assume this would happen because of collaborative efforts. And we're not only talking social cohesion at the level of government.
Yeah.
We're talking social cohesion at every level.
Yeah.
So haven't you gotten a chance to give your input where it should be given? And you talked about ads that are there since when?
We definitely need to expand those opportunities. And I think that, you know, friends disagree, even families disagree. Mm-hmm. You know, conflict is a part of transformation. And when we talk about transforming the university, when we talk about the university, and the Vice Chancellor speaks about the Renaissance, the President spoke about the Renaissance first, actually, about declaring last year a year of the Renaissance for Guyana. So when we talk about the Renaissance, we're talking about ideas. We're talking about a conflict of ideas. We're talking about the re-emergence of new ways of thinking, of new ways of doing things. And that comes out of a process of conflict, because out of conflict you have resolution. Mm-hmm. And that resolution takes us closer to our most ideal, you know. Mm-hmm. And that is what we're saying here, that there are issues that we disagree on, but this doesn't mean that we're not a family. You know, we disagree on this, but we want to set some things in place. And we hope that this particular impasse, this instance, which has to do with the administrative fees, which is only one instance, gives us the opportunity to talk more broadly about a communication policy, customer relations for the university, about the governance of the university, governance systems. The university has already made some progress in relation to that, because there's a governance review committee that was meeting for several months, and they're going to be reporting soon to the council. So they've been looking at governance issues at the university, a fee policy for the university, that we know that once you're involved in a program of study, you can't change the fee in the middle of the program, even if you have a new fee structure, that fee structure can't apply to me who
you're already
there in a program,
for those coming in, the babes I like to call them.
Right. So you establish that, you give fair notice, because if a student is on scholarship and there's a fee increase of 43% over 3 years, by the end of that, in the last year, that student's last year,